While Democrats are at least attempting to move ahead on impeachment, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is throwing cold water on that move. Let's go to NBC's Sahil Kapoor, who's joining me now. I have a feeling you're going to pick up where Josh left off, Sahil. What are lawmakers saying about all this?
Alex, there's anger, there's fury, there's dismay, and most notably among Democrats, there's determination to do something about President Trump. They don't want to be the opposition party that sits back and doesn't act on something as grave as this. Now, the top two Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi in the House and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, have said that the president should resign, the cabinet should remove him. As Josh pointed out, that is looking highly unlikely, and the only option they have here, if that doesn't happen, is impeachment. They're already circulating among Democrats articles of impeachment, one single article called Incitement of Insurrection, that accuses the president of willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States, a charge every bit as serious as it sounds. That is an article of impeachment that Democrats appear likely to take up as early as next week if there's no intervening action between then. Let's take a listen to what Speaker Pelosi said on 60 Minutes, capturing how she feels about this.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Hi, friends. Mockler back again. Missed these sessions. Congress has delivered a stark ultimatum to Trump. Resign with dignity or face full impeachment and removal. His response was predictable: refusal, defiance, and doubling down, making the constitutional crisis even worse. Right now, we're in this insane moment where over 120 members of Congress from both sides of the aisle are publicly calling for Trump to resign from office. 7 senators have just joined them in making that demand. Articles of impeachment are already advancing through committees. And Trump is sitting there saying, "No thanks, I'm staying. Come and get me if you think you can." This is the kind of constitutional standoff that doesn't happen in normal democracies anymore. This is the kind of thing you read about in history books when empires are falling apart.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
No, it isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Now, the Speaker has even inquired about the president's access to the nuclear codes to give you a sense of where her mind is at the moment. The biggest problem for Democrats at this point is the calendar. President Trump has only 11 days in office left, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, has not explicitly taken a position on the issue of impeachment and conviction, but he is quietly throwing cold water on the idea by circulating a memo pointing out that without unanimous consent, which is how the Senate does pretty much anything quickly, it is not going to be able to receive any articles of impeachment on January 19th. That is one day before President-elect Biden takes office. That puts Democrats in a position of deciding, do they want to spend some of the early days of Joe Biden's presidency focusing on impeaching and convicting the previous president? The last thing here to keep in mind, the main utility of throwing Donald Trump out of office via impeachment and conviction would be to prevent him from running for office again. Under the Constitution, he is entitled to seek a second term. There are rumors that he might do that in 2024. If Democrats pursue the article of impeachment and are able to convict him, a big if, they intend to include language to bar him from ever running for president again. Alex?
Yeah, you've given us a very realistic breakdown on what's to come, but I had that conversation with Melissa Murray, an NYU law professor, of exactly if that could be accomplished in the last hour.
Or when countries are descending into political crisis. What makes this moment so extraordinary is the unprecedented nature of what we're witnessing. Congress, which is usually split and dysfunctional most of the time, has suddenly found unity on one thing. That thing is that Trump needs to go. And they're not just whispering about it in back rooms where nobody can hear. They're doing it publicly. They're doing it on camera. They're doing it in official statements. They're doing it in ways that cannot be ignored or dismissed as mere political posturing. Over 120 House members and 7 senators have essentially said, "You know what, Trump? We're giving you an out here. We're giving you a choice. You can resign quietly. You can say it's for your family, for your health, for personal reasons, whatever you want to tell the press and the American people.
All right, let's get you more news from Donald Trump. Well, the American president is now facing calls to be impeached after he drew criticism with a fiery message on Iran. Trump has continued his polarizing rhetoric on Easter Sunday, delivering an expletive-laden attack on Iran that sparked criticism on Capitol Hill and beyond. Trump renewed his threat to unleash heavy bombing on Iranian power plants and bridges if Tehran refused to unblock the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Praise to be Allah is what he's added after ending another threatening message a day earlier with glory be to God. The post has raised eyebrows, especially on a Christian holiday. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wished Americans on Easter as he lambasted Trump, saying that the president is, quote, ranting like an unhinged madman on social media. Schumer also added that Trump was threatening possible war crimes and alienating allies, and that the country deserved so much better. Likewise, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who opposes the war in Iran, also wrote that,
walk away with some dignity still there. Step aside and live to fight another day. Or, and I mean or, we're going to impeach you for real this time. We're going to have a full Senate trial. We're going to drag your name through the mud. We're going to have testimony. We're going to have evidence. We're going to make this the biggest removal process this country has seen since Andrew Johnson got impeached way back in 1868. Take your pick. Trump's response to this offer was exactly what everyone expected. You think Trump is going to take a deal like that? Trump doesn't resign from anything. Trump doesn't admit defeat. Trump doesn't slink away quietly into the sunset. Trump fights. Trump doubles down.
if he were in Trump's cabinet, he would spend Easter calling constitutional lawyers about the 25th Amendment, referring to the clause that provides for a transfer of power if the president is unable to serve. The criticism, however, was not limited to Trump's Democratic opponents. Marjorie Taylor Greene, former Republican Congresswoman, has slammed his message, especially on Easter Sunday, saying that the people needed to stop worshipping the president and intervene in what she called Trump's madness. Democrats are talking about the 25th Amendment to impeach Donald Trump. The U.S. president has undergone two separate impeachment trials already under a separate provision back in 2020 and 21, and both ended his acquittal, making Trump the only president to have faced two impeachment trials. So let's tell you what this 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is all about. The constitutional provision came into existence after confusion following the death of President John F. Kennedy. The U.S. Congress approved the 25th Amendment in 1965, and it got ratified in 1967.
Trump insists that he did nothing wrong and that everyone else is crazy and that the whole thing is a setup. He looked at Congress and said, "No, absolutely not. Not happening. I'm the president. I was elected fair and square in a legitimate election. I won. Everyone is trying to get me because they're jealous and afraid of my power and my popularity. I've done incredible things. The country is stronger than ever, and I'm not going anywhere." That's the Trump move. That's his playbook. That's the pattern we've seen over and over. And now Congress has to decide whether they're serious about impeachment or whether this was just theater and political posturing that won't amount to anything.
This amendment created a legal mechanism for designating a head of state when the president is disabled or dead. It formalizes the practice for the vice president to permanently take over. Now, it's been never used to permanently remove a sitting president, but it has been voluntarily used by presidents to hand over temporary power to their seconds in command. George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan used it to undergo medical procedures, and it was once used by Richard Nixon, where he was forced to resign in 1973. The vice president and a majority of the cabinet members can declare the president as, quote, unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. And if the president disputes this, then 2/3 of the U.S. Congress can vote to put the vice president in charge. Now, with Trump nearing 80, rumors about his health and a visit to Walter Reed Hospital emerged online over the weekend, raising speculations around invoking the 25th Amendment. Both Trump and former President Joe Biden have faced scrutiny over their physical and cognitive fitness due to their ages.
This isn't like the other impeachments where both sides were kind of expecting it, or where the party in power could shrug and say whatever, we'll block this in the Senate anyway. This time, the pressure is different, the mood is different, the energy is different. You've got bipartisan calls for removal. You've got senators from both sides of the aisle saying Trump went too far. You've got legal analysts and constitutional experts all saying the same thing. The threat hangs over everything like a dark cloud. If Trump keeps refusing, if he keeps defying Congress, if he keeps pushing boundaries and breaking norms and violating his oath, then Congress has to make a choice. Do they actually try to remove him using the constitutional process that exists in the Constitution? Or do they just back off and let him stay and admit that they have no power? Because here's the thing that makes this so explosive and so unprecedented and so important. Congress isn't just asking Trump to resign because they don't like his policies or his tweets or his personality or his hair. They're asking him to resign because they believe he's violated his oath as President of the United States. They believe he's brought shame to the office. They believe he's fundamentally unfit and dangerous and that he poses a threat to the country. And they're saying, look, we're giving you a way out that doesn't involve a full impeachment trial that will tear the country apart. Just go. Just step down. Make it clean. Save yourself and save the country from a constitutional crisis that could damage institutions for generations. And Trump said no. That refusal is the crazy part. That's the moment that changes everything. That's the moment that takes this from political theater to actual constitutional emergency. Because now Congress can't just back off. They can't just drop it and move on to something else. If they do, they're saying that Congress has no power to check a president. They're saying that a president can do whatever he wants and there's nothing anyone can do about it. They're saying that the Constitution doesn't work. That's not a democracy. That's not how the Constitution is supposed to work. That's not what the founders intended. So now they're stuck. They have to either follow through on the impeachment threat or admit that they were bluffing the whole time. And if they're bluffing, then Congress is finished. They're just theater at that point. They're completely powerless. That's the real stakes here. That's why this story is absolutely crazy and why it's being talked about everywhere. It's not really about Trump wearing the wrong tie or saying something offensive. Well, I mean, it is partly about Trump, but it's also about whether Congress can actually do its job as a check on executive power. It's about whether the Constitution still matters in America. It's about whether we're still a country governed by laws, or whether we're just watching one guy act out his fantasies while everyone else scrambles to keep up and maintain some semblance of order. Trump refusing to step down isn't just defiance, it's a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. It's a moment where we find out if the system can actually work or if it's completely broken and useless. The options that the Constitution actually gives us as a country for removing a president from office are extremely limited. There are literally only 4 ways this can happen in America. Congress can't just vote to kick him out on a whim. The public can't protest him out of office. The media can't shame him into leaving. The courts can't force him to step down. There are only 4 legal mechanisms that exist under the Constitution of the United States, and they are the only ways a president can be removed before the end of their term. Trump voluntarily resigns. He just decides, okay, I'm done. I'm exhausted. I'm going to step down. And he walks away peacefully. That would be the cleanest option. That would be the fastest option. That would cause the least amount of damage to the country and its institutions. That's what Congress is asking him to do right now. But Trump said no. So that option is off the table, at least for now. The 25th Amendment. That's where the vice president and a majority of the cabinet get together and say, hey, we think the president is unfit to do his job, and we're using the constitutional mechanism to remove him from power. But that requires the VP and a majority of the cabinet to agree and vote, which is not going to happen because Trump picks his own cabinet. Trump doesn't put people in his cabinet who are going to turn on him and stab him in the back. Trump surrounds himself with loyalty. So that's not really a viable option either, and everyone knows it. Impeachment and conviction. That's where the House votes to impeach the president on charges, and then the Senate holds a trial and votes on whether to convict. If 2/3 of the Senate votes to convict him, then the president is removed from office permanently. That's the nuclear option. That's the full constitutional process. That's the most serious thing Congress can do. And that's what Congress is threatening right now. They're saying, look, if you don't resign, we're going to do this. We're going to impeach you. We're going to have a trial. We're going to make it all play out publicly. We're going to have witnesses. We're going to have evidence. Everything is going to come out. Trump loses the next election, and his term ends naturally when the election happens. But Trump's term isn't ending anytime soon, so that's not relevant right now, and it's not part of the conversation. So, when Congress walks up to Trump and says, resign or face impeachment, they're really only talking about two viable options: step down voluntarily or face the formal impeachment in Senate trial process. And Trump has already picked his option. He's going to fight. He's going to insist he did nothing wrong. He's going to say, this is a witch hunt and a coup. And Congress is going to have to decide whether they're serious about impeachment or whether they're just bluffing for political points to satisfy their base. Now, here's where it gets really complicated and really interesting, and where the political reality hits the constitutional theory. Over 120 members of Congress just issued this demand for resignation. That's a lot of people. That's a significant portion of the House. But the House has about 435 members total. So 120 is still less than a third. And for impeachment to actually happen, the House needs a simple majority vote. So they need at least 218 votes. 120 is not enough by itself. They would need about 100 more votes to actually impeach Trump. So even though there's all this public pressure and all these demands flying around, the actual vote count for impeachment is still not guaranteed. Not yet, anyway. That's the gap between political theater and constitutional reality. That's the gap between what people are saying and what they can actually do. Same thing with the Senate and conviction. You need 2/3 of the Senate to convict, which is 67 senators out of 100 total. Right now, even if the House impeaches, there's basically no way you get 67 senators to vote to convict and remove Trump from office. The Republican senators, even if they're frustrated with Trump, and even if they think he went too far, are not going to vote to remove him from office. That's a hard line for most of them. That's a betrayal of their party and their base that most of them are not willing to do, because it would destroy their political career. So even if Congress impeaches, the Senate is probably not going to convict. That's a real possibility here, that Congress goes through the whole process, drags everyone through a full impeachment trial for weeks or months, and then the Senate votes to acquit, and Trump stays in office anyway. That would be humiliating for Congress. That would prove that they were just posturing the whole time. But here's the thing that keeps Trump and his team up at night. Trump doesn't know for sure that the Senate would acquit him. Nobody knows for sure. Things could change. More senators could get frustrated. Public opinion could shift dramatically. Another scandal could break. That's even worse. The pressure could mount. And that uncertainty is what Trump is actually afraid of, even if he won't admit it. That's why Congress is using the threat of impeachment as leverage. They're saying, look, do you really want to risk a full Senate trial? Do you really want to have testimony and evidence and all this stuff come out publicly? Do you really want to put yourself and your family through that? Do you want all your secrets exposed? Just resign and avoid it. Just walk away. But Trump can't back down. That's not who he is. He spent his whole life never backing down from anything. He spent his whole life fighting and insisting he's right. So he's going to make Congress go through the whole process whether they like it or not. And that process is messy and complicated and weird because Congress is split and dysfunctional and nobody really knows how it's going to end. The political landscape is unstable. The parties are fractured. There are factions within both parties with different agendas and different interests. But Trump is going to fight it anyway. He's going to use every tool he has. He's going to use his social media platforms. He's going to use his supporters. He's going to use his lawyers. He's going to use every technique he knows to defend himself. Trump's pattern is always the same. He's done this before. After the Mueller investigation, after Ukraine, after January 6th, every time someone threatens him or investigates him or tries to remove him, Trump does the exact same thing. He rages. He insists he did nothing wrong. He says it's a witch hunt and a hoax and a coup. He says everybody's jealous of him and the system is rigged against him. And then he digs in and refuses to resign or cooperate. And every single time it makes the whole situation worse. It escalates. It gets more tense. It becomes more dangerous. So now we're in this loop where Congress is escalating with demands and threats, and Trump is refusing to back down or compromise. And we're heading toward a full constitutional confrontation that nobody really wants. But that seems unavoidable at this point. And nobody knows how it ends because we've never really been here before. We've had impeachments in American history. But we've never had a situation where you've got this much public pressure, this much bipartisan demand, this much talk about the president actually being unfit for office and dangerous. This is uncharted territory. This is unprecedented. This is the kind of moment where you look back at history and go, yeah, that's when things started to fall apart. That's when democracy started cracking. That's when it got real and stopped being abstract theory. The gap between political pressure and constitutional reality is crucial to understand because a lot of people don't understand this distinction. Congress can demand that Trump resign all day long. They can pass resolutions. They can make speeches. They can go on the news and talk about how unfit he is. They can call press conferences. They can issue statements. They can write op-eds. But none of that actually makes him resign. None of that actually removes him from office. None of that has any legal force. The only things that matter in a legal sense are the constitutional mechanisms, impeachment and conviction in the Senate, the 25th Amendment process, voluntary resignation. Those are the only things that work. Those are the only things that are binding. Everything else is just noise and political theater. And right now, Trump has made it clear he's not choosing voluntary resignation, and the 25th Amendment isn't going to happen because his cabinet is loyal to him and he controls them. So the only real option left is impeachment and Senate trial. And that's a heavy lift. That's a difficult thing to accomplish. The House probably has the votes to impeach if they get everyone who's currently demanding resignation on board and maybe a few more people who haven't publicly committed yet. That would be around 220 to 230 votes maybe, which is just over the 218 needed. So impeachment could happen. It's possible. But then you get to the Senate and you need 67 votes to convict. You probably have maybe 20 to 30 Republican senators who are frustrated enough with Trump to consider voting for conviction. The rest are not going to vote to remove him. They just won't. It's not going to happen. So you could end up in a situation where the House impeaches, the Senate has a trial with all the testimony and evidence and drama, and then the Senate votes 48 to convict and 52 to acquit or something like that. Trump stays in office, he survives, and Congress just wasted everyone's time and attention. That's actually a possibility, and it's kind of horrifying when you think about it deeply, because then Congress has no real power. Then Trump wins. Then the whole system is revealed to be broken, because Congress can try to remove the president and fail, and there's nothing they can do about it. The system just doesn't work if the political opposition can't even remove a president when they have significant majorities and bipartisan support. That breaks democracy in a fundamental and perhaps irreparable way. Trump's refusal to step down is completely on brand for him. This is what Trump does. This is who he is. He always fights. He never admits he's wrong. He never backs down. He never takes a deal that involves him losing face or admitting any wrongdoing whatsoever. So when Congress said resign or face impeachment, Trump's response was basically, no, I'm staying right here. Come and get me if you're brave enough. And that's what he's going to do the whole way through this process if it gets that far. If Congress impeaches him, he's going to rage on social media. He's going to say it's a witch hunt and a hoax and persecution. He's going to tell his supporters that Congress is trying to stage a coup. He's going to make the whole process as combative and divisive as possible. He's not going to cooperate. He's not going to show remorse. He's not going to do anything to make this process easier on anybody or faster or less painful. That's actually part of why this is so dangerous and so frightening to people, because Trump's defiance is infectious. It spreads to his supporters like a virus. It spreads to his party. It spreads to media outlets that support him. And suddenly you've got a situation where half the country thinks Congress is staging a coup, and the other half thinks Congress is finally doing something about a dangerous president. And the country is more divided than ever, and the democratic institutions that are supposed to hold everything together are being torn apart by the conflict. This is happening because Trump has apparently crossed some kind of line that even members of his own party think is too far. The evidence shows that Trump violated his oath and brought shame to the presidency. Articles of impeachment are already advancing through committees. So there's clearly something specific that happened that triggered this demand for resignation. We don't know exactly what it is from the available information alone, but it's something serious enough that over 120 members of Congress decided they had to do something about it right now. It's something serious enough that 7 senators decided to step out and put their names on this demand. So this isn't just random political theater or a stunt. This is Congress responding to something that members on both sides think is actually dangerous or illegal or unconstitutional or all three. That matters because it means Congress isn't just playing games here. They're serious about this. They're actually considering whether Trump has crossed a line that requires his removal from office. And that's a high bar. That's a serious threshold. That's not something Congress does lightly or often. The outcome of this situation is going to define what kind of country we are going forward and what kind of democracy we actually have. Either Congress backs off and admits that they can't actually remove a sitting president even when they have significant support in bipartisan votes, or Congress follows through on impeachment and either removes Trump or fails to convict him and proves that the system doesn't work. Either way, we're going to learn something really important and fundamental about our democracy. We're going to learn whether Congress has any real power to check a president who goes too far and violates his oath. We're going to learn whether the Constitution's removal mechanisms actually work or whether they're just old paper that doesn't mean anything anymore. That's a big deal because if Congress can't remove Trump, even with this much public pressure and bipartisan support, and when they seem to think he's violated his oath, then Congress can't remove any president for anything. That means the presidency is too powerful. That means we don't have checks and balances anymore. That means we're not a constitutional democracy in any real sense. That means we're living under an elected autocrat. Congress gave Trump an ultimatum: resign with dignity or face impeachment in a full Senate trial. Trump said no and refused completely. And now we're heading toward a confrontation that could reshape our entire understanding of how the government is supposed to work and what the Constitution actually means. Congress either follows through on the threat and tries to remove Trump through the formal constitutional process, or they back off and admit that they have no real power to check presidential power. Either way, we're about to find out if the Constitution still works or if we're living in something else entirely. That's where we are right now. That's the stakes. That's why this story is crazy, and why it matters so much, and why everyone is paying attention to what happens next. Because the answer to what Congress does in the next few weeks might be the answer to what kind of country we actually are, and whether we're still a constitutional democracy or something else entirely. The political implications are staggering. If Congress fails to remove Trump, the precedent it sets could echo through generations. Future presidents will know that they can push the boundaries of their power without fear of removal. If Congress succeeds, it will be a historic moment of accountability that reaffirms the strength of American democratic institutions. But the path to either outcome is fraught with uncertainty. The votes aren't guaranteed. The political will is fragile. The public sentiment is divided. And through it all, Trump remains defiant, refusing to accept any outcome that involves his departure from power. The next few weeks will determine the course of American democracy for decades to come. The decisions made in Congress, the votes cast, the arguments made, the principles upheld or abandoned, all of it will be studied by historians and judged by future generations. And at the center of it all is a president who refuses to leave, a Congress that must decide whether to force him out, and a country that must watch it all unfold and decide what kind of nation it wants to be.